This story is titled, My Wife Was Shocked When I Invited Her Lover's Wife to a Backyard Party. My revenge was brutal. Everyone was shocked. Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. What's up, everyone? So, I thought I had my life all figured out. You know, married for 5 years to Harper, the love of my life, or so I thought. We were the couple everyone admired. Every holiday card was a Pinterest-worthy masterpiece. We'd argue over who got the bigger slice of pie at Thanksgiving and laugh about it later. Pretty normal stuff, but apparently I missed the memo about how happily ever after isn't in the cards when your wife is sneaking around with some dude named Travis. Let me paint the picture. It's a Saturday morning, a perfect fall day, the kind where the leaves crunch just right under your boots and the air smells like fresh-cut grass. I'd just finished mowing the lawn and came inside, feeling accomplished. Harper's on the couch, laughing at her phone like she just found the funniest meme ever. At first, I didn't think much of it. Harper's always been chatty and glued to her phone, but then I noticed something different. She's not sharing the meme with me. Normally, she'd shove the phone in my face like, "Babe, you gotta see this." Not this time. Instead, I get the silent treatment while she's giggling like a teenager. Whatever, I brush it off. Relationships are all about trust, right? But then, little things start adding up, like how her phone is suddenly glued to her side. She's taking it to the bathroom like it's a lifeline. Then there are these mysterious late nights at work. Lots of them. I didn't even question it at first because, hey, Harper's in marketing, and sometimes campaigns need extra hours. But now I'm wondering, were those big projects actually PowerPoint presentations, or were they just code for that dude? Sure, here's the longer version. And it wasn't just the phone. There was this shift in Harper. At first it was subtle, almost like the kind of change you wouldn't notice unless you were paying close attention. But I was paying attention. She'd laugh at my jokes, but it felt hollow, like she was going through the motions. You know when someone smiles, but it doesn't quite reach their eyes? That was her. The warmth, the spark. It was fading. I chalked it up to stress or work or anything but what it really was. Like an idiot, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe I was imagining things. But those little changes started adding up. Harper, who used to toss her phone on the couch or leave it charging anywhere, now had it glued to her hand. She'd always been pretty open about everything. Texts, emails, even her weird Pinterest boards. But now it was like Fort Knox. The phone was either in her pocket, face down, or locked away. She started being vague about her schedule too. Meetings ran longer, late-night work sessions became more frequent, and her stories didn't always add up. I'd ask her about her day, and the answers were clipped, rushed, like she just wanted me to stop asking. And then came the day, the one where everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon. Harper had gone upstairs to shower, and her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. I don't know why, but seeing it sitting there felt weird, like it didn't belong. I stood there, staring at it. Should I? Shouldn't I? I mean, snooping isn't exactly the hallmark of a healthy relationship, but when the person you trust starts acting shady, that trust starts to crack. And once it cracks, all you want is to patch it up, or at least figure out where it's leaking. So, yeah, I grabbed the phone. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just needed peace of mind, right? Just a quick check to prove to myself I was being paranoid. A small peek, no harm done. Big mistake. The first thing I see is a text thread with someone named Travis. Travis? I didn't know a Travis. I clicked on it, and there they were. Messages I never should have seen. They weren't just casual. They were flirty, playful, intimate, inside jokes I didn't get, references to things I knew nothing about. And then I read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Last night? Amazing? My head was spinning. I scrolled up and it got worse. Photos. Selfies of the two of them in what was very obviously a hotel room. Her head on his shoulder. His arm around her waist. Both of them grinning like they are married. Like I didn't exist. I felt absolutely disgusted. Harper wasn't just working late. She wasn't tired or stressed or distant because of life. She was distant because she was busy. Busy sneaking around behind my back with Travis. I froze. My hands were still gripping the phone, but I couldn't move. My brain just stopped. You know how people say time slows down in moments like this? It's true. Those 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. My entire world shifted and everything started making sense in the worst possible way. And then I heard the water upstairs shutting off. I slammed the phone back down on the counter, trying to make it look untouched. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it from the bathroom. I couldn't let her see me like this. I couldn't let her know I knew. So I did the only thing I could think of. I walked back to the living room and sat down in my chair, trying to look as casual as possible, like nothing had happened, like my entire world hadn't just imploded. I grabbed the remote and stared at the TV, not even registering what was on. She walked into the room and gave me a quick smile before heading towards the kitchen. And I just sat there, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. I didn't confront her that day. No way. I wasn't about to storm and demanding answers. That's not my style. Plus, I already knew how that conversation would go. She'd deny it. She'd gaslight me. She'd twist it until I was the one apologizing. I needed more than just a gut feeling. I needed to play this smart. That night, I barely slept. Harper was next to me. I kept replaying the last few months. Every late night, every awkward excuse, every weird moment where she seemed distracted. It all made sense now. I wasn't even angry yet. That part came later. At that moment, I just felt stupid. Like, how did I miss this? How long had she been pulling this off? And who the hell was Travis, really? The next morning, I woke up early, determined to figure this out. While Harper was still asleep, I got out my laptop and went full FBI mode. It didn't take long to find him. A quick scroll through Harper's Instagram and some tagged photos from her work events confirmed it. Travis was one of her co-workers, of course. But Travis wasn't just some random dude. He was married to a woman named Sierra, and they had 2 kids. That little detail added a whole new level of betrayal. It wasn't just my life Harper was blowing up. It was Sierra's too. And those poor kids? They didn't deserve this. I sat there staring at Travis's grinning family photos on Facebook, wondering how many lies he'd told to keep up this double life. Did Sierra have any idea? Was she sitting at home, baking cookies for PTA meetings, while her husband was out here playing house with my wife? I thought about reaching out to Sierra right then and there, but something told me to hold off. If I was going to blow this thing wide open, I needed to do it right. I wasn't about to let Harper or Travis weasel their way out of this. That day, I decided I wasn't just going to sit back and let this betrayal crush me. I wasn't going to play the heartbroken victim while Harper and Travis got away with their little affair. No, I was going to make them regret it. I just needed a plan. And trust me, I wasn't going to wing it. This wasn't the kind of thing you go into half prepared, especially when you're up against 2 people who've been scheming behind your back for months. Harper and Travis had the upper hand for a while, but that was about to change. I was done being the clueless husband after the shook settled. I needed to take action, a big one, but I realized that I couldn't do this alone, not entirely at least. Sierra, Travis's wife, was a crucial piece of this puzzle. If I wanted to confront Harper and Travis without giving them the chance to lie their way out, Sierra needed to be in the loop. But how do you casually reach out to someone and tell them their spouse has been cheating? I couldn't exactly send her a text saying, "Hey, I think your husband is sleeping with my wife. Thoughts?" So, I kid you not, I got creative. I figured a neutral setting would be best. Something non-threatening, something neighborly. That's when the idea of a backyard barbecue popped into my head. We'd hosted plenty of them before, and Harper loved them. She'd help me plan, invite her coworkers, including Travis, and have no idea that she was walking right into her own downfall. Sounded perfect. I didn't waste time. The very next morning, I sent Sierra a Facebook message. It was polite, maybe even a little too friendly. I introduced myself as Harper's husband and mentioned that we were throwing a casual barbecue for some neighbors and work friends. I made sure to name drop a few of Harper's co-workers so it didn't seem weird. Then I added, "We'd love for you and Travis to join us. It'll be great to get to know some new faces." To my surprise, Sierra replied within an hour. She thanked me for the invite, said she'd check with Travis, and even mentioned how nice it was to meet someone making an effort to build community. Ouch. The irony of her words hit me like a truck. Meanwhile, Harper was completely clueless. She was thrilled about the barbecue idea, offering to help with decorations and food. She even suggested inviting some of her favorite coworkers, Travis included. That moment was pure gold. The person who was actively wrecking our marriage was suggesting I include her partner in crime at a social gathering in our own backyard. You can't make this stuff up. For the next few days, I played the role of the perfect husband. I let Harper think everything was fine while I meticulously planned every detail. The guest list was small but strategic. Neighbors, a few friends, and key people from Harper's workplace. I made sure to exclude anyone who might tip her off about what was coming. The hardest part was keeping my cool. Every time Harper talked about the barbecue, I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from saying something snarky. Like when she said, "Travis and Sierra are such a cute couple. I'm glad they're coming." Cute couple? Give me a break. But I stayed calm because I knew the payoff would be worth it. By the end of the week, everything was in place. I'd prepped the yard, borrowed a massive grill from a neighbor, and made sure the seating arrangements would force Harper and Travis to interact with Sierra and me. Timing was everything. If this was going to work, I needed to make sure everyone was comfortable and relaxed before I dropped the bomb. The day before the barbecue, Sierra messaged me again to confirm they'd be coming. She even asked if there was anything she could bring, which almost made me feel bad for her. She was so nice, so unsuspecting. I hated that she was going to find out about Travis's betrayal in such a public way, but I couldn't think of a better option. I needed her there, and I needed her to see the truth with her own eyes. That night, Harper and I sat on the couch planning the menu. She suggested burgers, hot dogs, and a couple of side dishes. It was like any other night, except for the fact that I was silently seething every time she smiled. How could she sit there, acting like everything was normal when she was sneaking around behind my back? The next morning, I woke up early, double-checking everything. The yard looked great. String lights overhead, tables set up with simple centerpieces, and a cooler full of drinks. It was the perfect suburban setup. Harper even commented on how nice and cozy everything looked, if only she knew what was coming. As the guests started arriving, I shifted into host mode. I greeted everyone with a smile and made small talk about the weather and football. Harper floated around the yard, laughing and chatting like the life of the party, but I could see the cracks. Every time I mentioned Travis's name, her smile faltered just a little, and then they showed up. Sierra and Travis walked in together, holding hands and looking every bit the happy couple. I caught Harper stealing a glance at Travis as he walked in from across the yard. Her eyes lingered just a moment too long before darting away. I swear she looked like she was trying to telepathically send him a message. Stay cool. Stay cool, my ass. Sierra was warm and friendly, immediately complimenting the setup and mingling with the neighbors. Travis, on the other hand, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His eyes darted around nervously, intentionally avoiding Harper altogether. I welcomed them both with a grin, shaking Travis's hand firmly and giving Sierra a warm nod. Harper was mid-conversation with one of our neighbors when she spotted them. Her face froze for the briefest moment before she plastered on her best fake smile and waved. Travis! Sierra! So glad you could make it, she said, her voice just a little too high-pitched. Watching her squirm was almost satisfying. As the afternoon wore on, I made sure to steer conversations in a way that would put Harper and Travis on edge. I chatted with Sierra, asking her about her kids and how she and Travis managed to balance work and family life. She seemed genuinely happy to talk, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. Meanwhile, Harper kept glancing at me, probably wondering what I was up to. I could tell she wanted to pull me aside and ask why I'd invited Travis and Sierra, but she didn't dare make a scene. Until now, everything was falling into place. The stage was set. The only thing left was to deliver the final blow. But timing was everything. I wasn't about to rush it and miss the perfect moment. This wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about making them feel the weight of their betrayal in front of the very people who thought they were the epitome of decent, trustworthy individuals. At one point, Harper cornered me near the grill. Everything okay? She asked, her tone overly casual. Why wouldn't it be? I replied with a shrug, flipping a burger. I don't know, she said, her smile forced. You just seem different. I looked at her, letting the silence hang for a beat too long. Just focused on making this barbecue perfect, I said with a smirk. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't push it. Good. Let her stew. Dinner was served, and I strategically placed Sierra and Travis at a table near the center of the yard. Harper ended up at the same table naturally, which meant I got to watch the three of them navigate one of the most awkward dinners of their lives. Sierra, ever the optimist, tried to keep the conversation light, asking Harper about work. Oh, it's been so busy lately, Harper said, her voice strained. Big projects, you know how it is. I nearly choked on my burger. Big projects? That's what she was calling it? I kept my expression neutral, though. No need to give myself away just yet. Travis barely said a word, and every time Sierra tried to pull him into the conversation, he muttered something vague and took another bite of food. Harper looked like she was clinging to the edge of a cliff, smiling and nodding like her life depended on it. The neighbors, oblivious to the brewing storm, chatted happily about weekend plans and the latest neighborhood gossip. It was almost surreal, sitting there, knowing what I knew, while everyone else carried on like nothing was wrong. After dinner, I decided it was time to start planting seeds. I walked over to the dessert table, where Sierra was helping herself to a slice of pie. So, Sierra, I said, keeping my tone friendly, Travis must be busy at work, huh? Harper's always mentioning how late he's been staying to finish those projects. Sierra looked up, her smile faltering slightly. Yeah, he's been working a lot, she said, glancing over at Travis. Sometimes I barely see him during the week. Must be tough, I said, nodding sympathetically. Harper's been putting in a lot of late nights too. They make quite the team, don't they? She smiled politely, but I could see the faintest flicker of doubt in her eyes. Across the yard, Harper was watching us. Her body was stiff, her hand gripping her drink like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I gave her a small wave, and she quickly looked away. As the evening wore on, the tension became almost unbearable. Harper and Travis were clearly on edge, and even Sierra seemed to pick up on something being off. She kept glancing at Travis, her brows furrowing slightly, like she was piecing together a puzzle that didn't quite make sense yet. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the string lights began to twinkle, I decided it was time. I stood up, clinking my glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down as the guests turned to look at me. "Hey everyone," I began, my voice calm and steady. "I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for coming tonight. It's not often we get to bring everyone together like this, and I think it's important to celebrate community and friendship." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the crowd before landing on Harper. And of course, a big thank you to Harper for helping me put this together. She's been working so hard lately, both at home and at work. It's really inspiring. Harper's face turned a shade paler, and her smile wavered. "And speaking of work," I continued, turning to Travis and Sierra, "it's been great getting to know more of Harper's coworkers. Travis, I've heard so much about you. Harper's always talking about how dedicated and hardworking you are." Travis shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting to Harper, then back to me. "But you know," I said, my tone sharpening slightly, "it's not just about work, it's about trust." I stressed on the word trust and continued, "About being honest with the people who matter most." The silence was deafening. I locked eyes with Harper, my voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Harper," I said, slow and deliberate, "would you like to go ahead and tell everyone here about your secret late-night meetings with Travis? Or should I lay it all out for you?" The gasps from the crowd were almost satisfying. Harper's chair scraped against the concrete as she stood up, her face flushed with panic. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is." Sierra turned to Travis, her confusion morphing into alarm. "Travis, what's he talking about?" Travis opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. I smiled, the calmest I'd felt in weeks. "I'm talking about the affair, the texts, the hotel meetups, everything." Sierra's face crumpled as the realization hit her. "Travis?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The yard erupted into murmurs and gasps. Harper and Travis looked like deer caught in headlights, and Sierra's devastation was written all over her face. I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold. My job was done, or so I thought. But as the yard descended into chaos, it became clear that the fallout was far from over. Harper stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Travis looked like someone had just told him his car was on fire. And Sierra, poor Sierra, was staring at her husband with a mix of heartbreak and fury that could melt steel. The murmurs among the guests grew louder. Neighbors exchanged wide-eyed glances, some whispering, others openly gawking. Nobody was leaving, though. Oh no, they weren't going to miss the live drama. Harper finally found her voice. "James, can we please talk about this privately?" she begged, her tone wavering between desperation and anger. "This isn't the right place." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not the right place? That's rich coming from you. Was the hotel room the right place, Harper? Or was that just convenient?" More gasps from the crowd. One of the neighbors muttered, "Oh, damn," under his breath. Harper's face turned red, either from embarrassment or fury. I couldn't tell, and honestly, I didn't care. Sierra, meanwhile, rounded on Travis. "Is it true?" she demanded. "You're sleeping with her? After everything? After all we've been through?" Travis looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "Sierra, It's not what you think," he stammered, his hands raised defensively. "Oh, don't you dare!" Sierra yelled, cutting him off. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me right now. I'm not stupid, Travis. He has proof. Do you hear me?" "Proof?" I nodded, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Would anyone like to see the texts? Or the pictures?" I offered, holding it up. "Because trust me, I've got plenty." That shut everyone up. Harper's eyes darted to my phone, then to the crowd. "James, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I can fix this." I scoffed, my voice cold and sharp. "You didn't just break our marriage. You destroyed it. You crossed every line and left nothing behind to salvage." The crowd's attention shifted back to Sierra and Travis as Sierra's anger boiled over. "You're disgusting," she spat at him, her voice shaking. "I trusted you. I built a life with you. You have kids? And this is what you do? And with whom?" With her. She gestured toward Harper disgustingly like she's a piece of trash, who flinched like she'd been slapped. Travis reached for Sierra's arm, but she yanked it away. Don't touch me, she hissed. Don't you dare touch me! Harper, desperate to shift the blame, turned to me. James, you don't understand, she said, tears streaming down her face. I was lonely. You've been so distant lately. I made a mistake, okay? A horrible mistake. But you have to take some responsibility for this. Responsibility? I shot back, incredulous. You think this is my fault? That's a hell of a stretch, Harper, even for you. You stopped caring, she continued, her voice rising. You barely looked at me anymore. What was I supposed to do? Not cheat, for starters, I snapped. That would have been nice. The neighbors, who had been murmuring quietly, now seemed to divide into two camps. Those who were horrified by the spectacle and those who were clearly loving every second of it. One woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded grimly. Another couple exchanged awkward glances before quietly slipping out the gate. But most of them stayed, too curious or too entertained, to leave. Sierra turned her attention back to me, shaking. How long? She asked. How long has this been going on? About 6 months, I said flatly, holding her gaze. Maybe longer. I found the texts a few weeks ago. Dates, times. They match up with all those late nights Harper's been working. Sierra's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. 6 months, she whispered, as if saying it out loud made it more real. Then her expression hardened. She turned to Travis and said, We're done. Do you hear me? Done. Travis didn't even try to argue. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped in defeat as Sierra stormed toward the gate. Wait! Harper called after her. But Sierra didn't even turn around. She pushed the gate open, slamming it shut behind her with a force that made everyone wince. The sound echoed through the yard like a gunshot. Travis hesitated, looking from Harper to the gate. I should go after her, he mumbled. But he didn't move. Yeah, you should, I said, laughing. But don't expect her to take you back. If she's smart, she won't. Travis glared at me for a moment before turning and walking out of the yard. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes were on Harper now, who looked small and defeated, standing alone in the middle of the chaos she'd created. The neighbors began to disperse, one by one. A few offered me awkward pats on the back or mumbled words of sympathy as they left. No one said a word to Harper. By the time the yard was empty, it was just the two of us. Harper stood by the table, her arms wrapped around herself. James, she whispered, please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did, I said, my tone flat. And now you have to live with it. She stepped closer, tears streaming down her face. I'll do anything, she said, her voice breaking. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just don't give up on us, please. I stared at her for a long moment, my emotions swirling like a storm. Anger, betrayal, sadness. All of it threatened to overwhelm me, but there was no going back. Harper shattered all the trust I had for her. She was my wife, and I was committed to her only for her to go with a jerk like Travis. I couldn't forgive her for it. There's nothing left to save, I said quietly. You destroyed it. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I turned and walked inside, leaving her standing there in the dark. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a start. The fallout, though, was anything but clean. If you've ever seen a perfectly controlled demolition where a building collapses neatly into its own footprint, this was the opposite. It was messy, unpredictable, and left wreckage everywhere. Harper might have been the epicenter, but the shockwaves reached everyone around us. That night, after I left her in the backyard, Harper stayed out there for hours. I could hear her pacing back and forth on the deck, her muffled sobs cutting through the otherwise quiet night. I didn't care. I locked myself in the guest room, trying to piece together how we'd gotten here. It wasn't like I was blindsided anymore, but seeing it all play out so publicly made it hit differently. The next morning, Harper was gone by the time I woke up. She left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "We need to talk. Call me when you're ready." I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. But the day didn't end there. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. Of course, when you publicly expose an affair at a barbecue, it doesn't stay a secret for long. By lunchtime, half the neighborhood knew, and by the evening, the other half did too. I started getting texts and calls from friends, family, and even some of Harper's co-workers who had been at the barbecue. Most of them had the same tone: shock, disbelief, and a sprinkling of awkward condolences. "Hey man, just heard what happened. That's rough. You okay?" I never would have thought Harper would do something like that. "You need anything? You're handling this better than I would. Stay strong." The most satisfying part is a message from one of Harper's co-workers who hadn't been at the barbecue. "Travis is screwed. HR got wind of what happened. Pretty sure he's about to get canned. Good. As for Harper, she didn't come back that day. Or the next. She must have gone to a friend's place or a hotel, because I didn't hear a peep from her except for one text asking if she could come by to grab some things. I ignored it. Instead, I focused on cleaning up the mess, literally and figuratively. The yard still had remnants of the barbecue. I cleaned it all up, one piece at a time, like I was scrubbing Harper's betrayal out of my life. By the end of the week, the lawyers were involved. Harper and I didn't even argue about the divorce. It was like she knew she had no ground to stand on. She'd stop by when I wasn't home to pack up her things, leaving little notes behind asking if we could talk things through. I never responded. Then there was Sierra. She was the wild card in all this. I didn't expect to hear from her again, but a week after the barbecue, she called me. I just needed to hear from someone who understands, she said, her voice strong. I'm so angry, but I also feel like I can't stop crying. It's like my life isn't my own anymore. I get it, I told her. And I did. We talked for over an hour, swapping stories and piecing together timelines. It was surreal, bonding with the person whose life had been destroyed alongside mine. But it helped. Sierra wasn't wasting any time, though. She'd already filed for divorce and had moved back to her parents' house with the kids. I'm not sticking around to see if Travis can redeem himself, she said. He made his bed, and now he can rot in it. Hearing her resolve made me feel lighter in a way. If she could move forward, so could I. But it didn't stop with Harper and Travis. Our mutual friends started taking sides, which was somehow both expected and incredibly frustrating. Some people reached out to me, apologizing for Harper's behavior and offering their support. Others, though, clearly felt torn. She made a mistake, one mutual friend told me, as if 6 months of sneaking around was a mistake and not a calculated series of choices. Don't you think you should at least hear her out? No, I said flatly. I don't. That seemed to be the end of that friendship. Harper's reputation took a nosedive, too. She tried to spin the story in her favor, claiming I was distant and emotionally unavailable, but it didn't stick. People knew me well enough to see through the lies. Besides, the evidence was too damning to ignore. Texts, photos, hotel receipts. She didn't stand a chance. One of the neighbors even confronted me at the mailbox a couple of weeks later. James, I had no idea she was like that, he said, shaking his head. My wife's been telling me to stop hanging out with Travis at the gym. She says his kind of energy is contagious. I almost laughed. Smart woman, I replied. But consequences wasn't just social. It honestly touched my professional life too. At first, the stress threatened to creep in, but instead of letting it pull me under, I used it as fuel. My focus sharpened like never before. I poured my energy into my work, not to prove anything to Harper, but to prove to myself that I wasn't going to let her mess derail me. When my boss pulled me aside, it wasn't to call out slipping performance. It was to commend me for stepping up. I'd been gunning for a new opportunity anyway, so I started quietly putting out feelers, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. By the time interviews rolled in, I was already moving on to bigger and better things. While Harper was busy trying to spin her version of events, I was leveling up. A fresh start wasn't just an idea anymore. It was already in motion. Life slowly started to stabilize after that. The house felt emptier without Harper's stuff, but it also felt better, cleaner, like I could finally breathe without her lies suffocating me. I started focusing on myself. Sierra and I stayed in touch, mostly through texts and the occasional phone call. We didn't lean on each other too much. It was more like we were checking in, making sure the other person was still standing. She even sent me a photo of her kids playing in the backyard of her parents' house. They're going to be okay, she wrote. And so am I. I was happy for her. As for Harper, she faded into the background. I'd hear bits and pieces through mutual friends, how she was living in a tiny apartment across town, how she was trying to rebuild her life, whatever that meant. She reached out a couple more times, asking if we could talk, but I never replied. The last I heard, Travis had lost his job. Sierra told me he tried to get her to take him back, but she slammed that door shut. Good for her. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like a new person. Turns out divorce is not a so bad idea. The bitterness was still there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. It was just a reminder. A scar to remind me to pay attention next time. One night, I sat out on the back porch, looking at the yard where everything had gone down. The string lights were still there, though I hadn't turned them on since the barbecue. It felt like a lifetime ago. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated, just free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the weight of trying to fix something that was never going to be whole again. The fallout had been brutal, but in a strange way, it was exactly what I needed to start over. And yeah, that's my story. If you think I overreacted, I respect your opinion. but it only meant reclaiming my right of being cheated on like any respectable man would. The only difference is that I did it in my style.
I still can't believe how quickly everything changed that afternoon. One minute I was driving back from meeting with my realtor, excited about possibly buying my first apartment, and the next minute is mostly a blur. My name is Sheila, and I'd spent the last hour discussing mortgage options and looking at a promising 2-bedroom apartment that was finally within my price range. The meeting had gone well, and I was feeling optimistic about my chances of getting approved for the loan. I remember pulling out of the realtor's parking lot and heading down Marshall Street. The sun was bright, and I had to adjust my visor to see properly. That's probably why I only caught a glimpse of the other car in my peripheral vision before everything went sideways, literally. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched against metal as the other vehicle slammed into my car at high speed. I felt my car being dragged across the pavement, the world spinning around me in a sickening blur. Then came another crash, this time into something solid. I later learned it was a utility pole. After that, everything gets fragmented. I was trapped in the twisted remains of my car, the steering wheel pressed uncomfortably against my chest. There was a strange smell, burning rubber maybe? And voices, lots of voices, coming from somewhere outside. I tried to respond but couldn't tell if any sound actually came out. Through my hazy vision, I could see flashing lights, red and blue strobes, that made my growing headache even worse. The next clear memory I have is of firefighters cutting through my car. The sound of metal being torn apart was horrifying, but I was too dazed to feel properly scared. They worked quickly, talking to me the whole time, though I can't remember what they were saying. When they finally got me out, everything became a whirlwind of activity. Paramedics transferred me to a stretcher, asking me questions and shining lights in my eyes. They were moving fast, which I guess should have told me how serious it was. "You need emergency surgery," one of them told me as they loaded me into the ambulance. "Is there anyone we should contact?" "My phone," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Call my parents. They're in my contacts, Mom and Dad." The last thing I remember is being wheeled through bright hospital corridors, fluorescent lights flashing past overhead. Someone in scrubs was telling me they were about to put me under anesthesia. Then everything went black. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was the emptiness. Just me, the steady beeping of monitors, and the sterile white walls of a hospital room. My throat felt like sandpaper, and there was a dull ache throughout my entire body that even the painkillers couldn't completely mask. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. Every inch of me protested, and I let out an involuntary groan. That must have alerted someone, because moments later a nurse walked in, clipboard in hand. "Good to see you're awake," she said, checking my vitals. "How are you feeling?" Like I got hit by a truck, I managed to croak out. "How long was I out?" "About 12 hours. The surgery went well." She adjusted something on my foredrip. "You're lucky, it could have been much worse." I glanced around the empty room again, before asking the question that was really on my mind. Did my parents come by while I was under? They should have been contacted. The nurse's expression changed slightly, just a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. She busied herself with checking my chart before responding. "We did reach your mother," she said carefully. "We informed her about the accident and your condition, but..." She paused, seemingly choosing her words. "She said they wouldn't be able to come. Something about your sister's high school graduation." "I'm sorry, should we try calling someone else?" "No," I said, settling back against the pillows. "No, this is exactly what I expected." And it was. Some might find it shocking that parents would choose a high school graduation over visiting their critically injured daughter in the hospital, but I knew better. This was just another chapter in a story that had been playing out my entire life. You see, I was born first, a difficult delivery that nearly killed both me and my mother. The doctors told my parents afterwards that the chances of having another child were practically non-existent. For 7 years, I was an only child, though looking back, I realize I was never quite enough for them. Then came the miracle. Against all odds, my mother got pregnant again. Emma was born healthy and perfect, and from that moment on, everything changed. No, that's not quite right, everything crystallized. The pattern that had always been there just became more obvious. Emma was their miracle baby, their second chance, their perfect daughter. Every wish was granted, every whim indulged. New clothes, the latest toys, the best of everything. Meanwhile, I learned to make do with hand-me-downs and clearance rack specials. The contrast was most obvious on birthdays. I remember my 13th birthday clearly. I got a modest set of colored pencils I'd been asking for. Before I could even properly thank them, they presented Emma with an expensive new dollhouse. So she wouldn't feel left out, they said, as my 6-year-old sister smirked at me over her much larger present. That became the pattern. Every celebration of mine had to include something for Emma, and her gift was always better. If they didn't, she'd throw epic tantrums, crying about how unfair it was that I got presents when she didn't. Rather than teach her about taking joy in others' happiness, my parents solved the problem by making sure she always got the better end of any deal. By the time I reached high school, I'd learned 2 important lessons. I couldn't count on my parents for anything, and the only way out was through my own hard work. My parents made that clear enough without ever actually saying it. The money was being saved for Emma's future. So I threw myself into everything I could. While other kids were hanging out at the mall or going to parties, I was staying late after school, building my resume. I studied like my future depended on it, because it did. Advanced placement classes, honor roll, academic competitions, you name it, I was there. "Sheila, would you be interested in starting a school newspaper?" Mrs. Rodriguez, my English teacher, asked me one day after class. "We need someone organized and dedicated to run it." I didn't just start the newspaper, I turned it into something the school had never seen before. We covered real issues, not just pep rallies and lunch menus. When the principal saw what we were doing, he approached me with another idea, a school TV station. We started broadcasting morning announcements, covering school events, even doing investigative pieces about local issues affecting students. Teachers couldn't stop singing my praises. The principal even wrote me a glowing college recommendation letter, calling me one of the most exceptional students in our school's history. But at home? Nothing changed. My parents barely noticed my achievements, too busy cooing over Emma's participation trophy from her soccer tournament or her B in math. The only person who seemed to notice my success was Emma herself, and not in a good way. "God, it's so annoying," I overheard her complaining to Mom one day. "Everyone at school keeps calling me Sheila's sister. Like I'm not even my own person. It's not fair." Instead of explaining to Emma that she could make her own name for herself through hard work, Mom just hugged her and said, "Don't worry, sweetie. You're special in your own way." All that work paid off though. When college acceptance letters started arriving, I had options, actual, real options. But the best one was from State University, 2 states over. Full scholarship, including room and board. When I told my parents, they barely looked up from helping Emma with her middle school science project. I left for college that fall, with Emma just starting 6th grade. The distance felt good, necessary, even. I got a part-time job at the campus coffee shop to cover my personal expenses, threw myself into my studies, and started building a life that had nothing to do with being the less favored daughter. My parents would call occasionally, but the conversations were always the same. Emma made the junior high cheerleading squad, where Emma got the lead in the school play. Never, "How are your classes going?" or "Are you eating enough?" were any of the normal questions parents typically ask their college students. After 4 years of building my own life at college, I made what was probably my biggest mistake. I went back home. I guess some part of me hoped things would be different now that I had a degree. They weren't. From the moment I walked through the door with my boxes, my parents acted like I was an unwanted houseguest who had overstayed their welcome. Mom would make these pointed little comments over breakfast about young adults who can't leave the nest, while Dad would casually leave apartment rental listings on the kitchen counter. Emma, now 15 and fully embracing her role as the family princess, was the most direct about it. "Why do you have to stay here?" she complained one morning, glaring at me across the breakfast table. "It's so embarrassing having my old sister living at home. None of my friends' siblings do that." I wanted to point out that most parents actually help their kids during the post-college transition, but what was the point? Instead, I threw myself into job hunting. I must have sent out 100 applications that first month. Finally, I landed a position as a junior project coordinator at a tech company. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to start saving for my escape. I worked extra hours, skipped lunch breaks, and saved every penny I could. After 2 months, I had enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a tiny studio apartment. The day I moved out, Mom actually looked relieved. "Don't forget to return your house key," was all she said as I carried out my last box. That little studio apartment might have been small, but it felt like paradise. For the first time in my life, I had a space that was completely mine. No one to make snide comments, no one to compare me to, no one to make me feel unwelcome in my own home. I channeled all my energy into work. Every project, every task, no matter how small, I gave it my all. Need someone to stay late? I volunteered. Difficult client? I'd handle it. Complex problem? I'd solve it. People started to notice. A year and a half after starting, I was called into my supervisor's office. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, but instead, she offered me a promotion to senior project coordinator. The salary bump meant I could finally start putting money aside for my own place. Another year passed, and I got promoted again, this time to project manager. I was actually proud of myself, so I made another mistake. I mentioned it at one of the family dinners I still occasionally attended, trying to maintain some kind of relationship with my parents. Mom and Dad suddenly got very interested, more interested than they'd been in anything about my life in years. "Project manager? That must pay well," Dad said, trying to sound casual. "How much are they giving you?" Before I could deflect the question, Emma jumped in with her usual tact. She looked me up and down, and started laughing. "Whatever it is, you should spend some of it on new clothes. You dress like somebody's grandmother." Mom and Dad joined in the laughter, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I didn't say a word. I just got up, grabbed my purse, and walked out. They could laugh all they wanted, I had an apartment to save for. The next 3 weeks in the hospital felt like an endless blur of pain, medication, and recovery. 2 surgeries, one to repair internal damage, another to fix my broken leg. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. My hospital room looked like a flower shop. My boss sent a huge arrangement with a note saying my job was secure and to take all the time I needed to recover. My coworkers took turns sending care packages, books, magazines, snacks, anything to help pass the time. Even my old school friends, who I hadn't seen in years, called to check on me. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from relatives and friends. Aunt Sarah called every evening to check my progress. My cousin Mike offered to drive up and help when I got discharged. Even my old college roommate Lisa reached out after seeing a post about my accident on social media. But nothing from my parents. Nothing from Emma. Not a call, not a text, not even a quick "hope you're okay" message. The empty space where their names should have been on my phone screen felt louder than all the other messages combined. Then, a week after my second surgery, they finally showed up. I was dozing in my hospital bed when I heard the door open. For a brief moment, my heart lifted, they'd come after all. Maybe the accident had made them realize. "Sheila." Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through my hopeful thoughts. "Good, you're awake." Dad hung back near the door while Mom marched up to my bedside. "No, how are you feeling?" "No, we were worried. Not even a "you look better." "We need to discuss something important," Mom continued, her tone businesslike. "Emma got her college acceptance letters. Several good schools want her, but we need money for her tuition. We know you've been saving to buy an apartment." It took me a moment to process what she was saying. Surely they hadn't come to my hospital bed, after ignoring me for a week, to ask for. "We expect you to help your sister," Mom said firmly. "Family helps family, and Emma needs this money for her education." I stared at them, the pain medication making everything feel slightly surreal. "Are you serious?" I finally managed to say. "I'm lying here after 2 surgeries, and you haven't even asked how I'm doing. But you want my savings?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom replied, waving her hand dismissively. "We knew you were getting proper medical care. The hospital kept us informed." "Emma has a real opportunity here," Dad added. "She can't miss this chance. These schools won't wait forever." Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the pain medication making me braver, or maybe it was just 25 years of built-up resentment finally boiling over. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" Mom's eyes widened. I said get out. My voice grew stronger. "For my entire life, you've made it clear that Emma matters more than me. Every birthday, every achievement, every milestone, it was always about her. I worked my way through college while you saved money for her. I built my career from nothing while you praised her every tiny accomplishment. And now?" I gestured at my hospital bed, at the machines monitoring my vital signs. "I almost died in that accident, and you couldn't even be bothered to visit until you wanted something from me. Now, Sheila," Dad started, finally stepping away from the door. "You're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" I laughed, and it hurt my ribs. "I'm unreasonable for wanting my parents to care that I almost died? I'm unreasonable for wanting to keep the money I earned to pay for my medical bills and buy my own apartment? No, not this time. I'm not giving you a penny of my savings for Emma's college." Mom's face turned an alarming shade of red. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I cut her off. "What exactly have you done for me? Name one thing. One single thing you've done for me that didn't somehow end up being about Emma." The silence that followed was deafening. They stood there, mouths opening and closing like fish out of water, clearly shocked that their reliable doormat of a daughter had finally stood up for herself. "You'll regret this," Mom finally said, her voice cold. She grabbed Dad's arm and pulled him toward the door. They didn't even say goodbye. Just stormed out, letting the door slam behind them. The noise made my head throb, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I'd stood my ground with them. My phone buzzed about an hour later. Then again, and again. I picked it up to find a stream of messages from Emma. "How dare you refuse to help me with college? You're just jealous, because I got into better schools than you ever could. You're so selfish. You don't need an apartment that badly. Mom and Dad are right, you're being completely unreasonable." The messages kept coming, each one more angry than the last. But it was the final message that made my blood run cold. "You know what? I wish you had died in that stupid accident. Then at least your money would have gone to something worthwhile, my education." I stared at the phone screen for a long time, my hands shaking. My baby sister, the miracle child, the one they'd all protected and coddled and spoiled, had just wished me dead. Over money. My finger hovered over the delete button for a moment. Part of me wanted to erase her words, to pretend they'd never existed. But something stopped me. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it to my cloud storage. After 5 weeks of hospital food and uncomfortable beds, coming back to my apartment felt like heaven, even if I needed help from a nurse to get up the stairs. Everything hurt, and the doctors had given me a long list of recovery exercises and physical therapy appointments, but at least I was home. The first thing I did was call my boss, Mark. I'd been worried about work, even though my colleagues had assured me everything was under control. "Sheila," Mark's warm voice came through the speaker. "How are you feeling? Are you settling back in okay?" "I'm home, but everything's still pretty rough," I admitted. The doctors say I need at least another month before I can think about coming back to work. I'm sorry about. Stop right there, he cut me off. Your health comes first. Just focus on getting better. Your job will be waiting for you when you're ready. I was just starting to feel optimistic when my phone buzzed with a social media notification. My mother had made a post and I'd been tagged in it. My stomach dropped as I started reading. As a mother, it breaks my heart to see such selfishness from my own daughter. After everything we've done for Sheila, she refuses to help her sister get an education. Emma got accepted to several prestigious colleges, but now she might miss this opportunity because her own sister is too greedy to share her money. How can anyone be so cruel to their own family? Emma's dreams are being crushed because of pure selfishness. The comments started rolling in immediately. I can't believe she would do that to her own sister. Family should always come first. What kind of person denies their sibling an education? She must be heartless. I watched as relatives and family friends, people who'd known me my whole life, piled on, condemning me without knowing the full story. Aunt Linda called me disgraceful. My mother's best friend Susan wrote about how disappointed she was in me. My hands were shaking as I clicked the reply button, but my voice was steady as I typed. Let me add some context to this story. 5 weeks ago, I was in a near-fatal car accident. I had 2 major surgeries. I spent 5 weeks in the hospital. During that time, my parents visited exactly once, not to check on my health, but to demand my savings for Emma's college fund. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't care about my recovery. They just wanted my money. For those wondering why I said no, I need that money for my medical bills and recovery. But even if I didn't, I earned every penny of it myself. I put myself through college without any help from my parents. They were saving for Emma's education then too. And for those who think I'm being cruel to my sister, let me share what she wrote to me while I was still in the hospital. I attached the screenshot of Emma's message. I wish you had died in that stupid accident. Then at least your money would have gone to something worthwhile, my education. So, to all of you judging me, I have a question. Would you give your savings to people who couldn't be bothered to visit you in the hospital? To a sister who wished you had died? To parents who have always made it clear that you matter less than your sibling? The silence that followed felt eternal. Then the new comments started coming in. Oh my God, Sheila, I had no idea. Emma said what? I can't believe they didn't even visit you in the hospital. You're absolutely right to keep your money. Focus on your recovery. Even Aunt Linda and Susan deleted their previous comments and posted apologies. The tide had turned completely, but I felt no satisfaction in it. Just tired. So very, very tired. It's amazing how much can change in 2 months. The physical therapy worked wonders. I'm walking normally now, though my leg still aches a bit when it rains. The scars are healing nicely, and last week I finally returned to work. The car insurance covered the full value of my totaled car, and I used it to buy a newer, safer model. The first time I got behind the wheel after the accident, my hands were shaking, but each drive gets a little easier. The health insurance payout was even better than I expected. I'd taken out a comprehensive policy 2 years ago, thinking it was just the responsible thing to do. Never imagined I'd actually need it, but now I'm thankful for past me's foresight. Between that and the company insurance, all my medical bills are covered, and there's still plenty left over. Yesterday, I signed the preliminary paperwork for my apartment. The down payment is ready to go, and I'm meeting with the bank next week to finalize the mortgage. Aunt Sarah called last week to keep me in the loop, as she put it. My parents had to take out a substantial loan to cover Emma's college tuition. They're not happy about the interest rates, but they didn't have much choice. They'd already promised Emma she could go to her dream school. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, hearing that would have hurt. I would have felt guilty, would have wondered if I should have helped after all. But now I feel nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, no anger. Just nothing. I deleted my parents' numbers from my phone. Blocked Emma on all social media. Changed my email address. Some might call it running away, but I see it differently. I'm not running from anything, I'm walking confidently toward the life I built for myself. The movers are coming next month. I've already started packing up my rental apartment, sorting through what to keep and what to donate. Last night, while going through old boxes, I found a photo from my high school graduation. I'm standing alone in my cap and gown, grinning at the camera. My parents aren't in the picture, they were busy with Emma that day. I put the photo in the keep pile. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. That girl in the graduation gown didn't need her parents' support to succeed, and neither does the woman I've become. Sometimes you have to build your own life, your own support system, your own home. And that's exactly what I've done.
This story is titled, My Siblings Refuse to Allow Me to Attend Their Weddings, so I Returned the Favor. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit, I never thought I'd find myself posting here, but I'm seriously losing my mind over what went down 2 weeks ago. It's been eating away at me, and I need to put it out there to see if I'm overreacting, or if this whole situation is as insane as it feels. So get ready, because this one's a doozy. Growing up, I was always the little one. My name is Emily, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My siblings, Mike, Chris, Rachel, and Josh, were all so much older than me that sometimes I felt like I was part of a different family. By the time I was old enough to start forming memories, they were already moving out, going to college, or starting their adult lives. It was like I was an afterthought, a weird tag-along they had to put up with. But even so, I loved them. When you're the youngest kid, you look up to your older siblings like they're heroes. I thought Mike hung the moon when I was little. He was the cool oldest brother who could do no wrong. Chris was quieter and more serious, but I still adored him. Rachel was my big sister, the one I always hoped would let me into her life and show me how to be like her. And Josh, the baby of the older ones, felt the closest to me in age, but even he kept me at arm's length. The first time it really hit me how I didn't matter to them was Mike's wedding. I was 10 years old. 10 is that weird age where you feel old enough to be included in grown-up things, but still young enough to be treated like a child. When Mike and his fiancée Sarah announced they were having a child-free wedding, I assumed that didn't mean me. I mean, I wasn't some random kid who would throw food or scream during the vows. I was his sister. I still remember the day my parents sat me down. I'd been so excited. I even asked my mom if I could wear one of her necklaces for the big day. That's when she said it. Mike and Sarah are having an adults-only wedding, Emily. You're not going to be able to come. I stared at her for a second, trying to process. But I'm not like other kids, I said, trying to reason with her. I'll be quiet. I promise. She patted my head like I was some kind of puppy. It's just for adults, sweetie. You'll understand when you're older. I didn't understand at all. I cried in my room for hours. Mike was my brother, and I wanted to see him get married. I wanted to be there to watch Sarah, who I already thought of as my sister, walk down the aisle. But instead, my parents left me with a babysitter. I remember the feeling of staring at the clock that day, imagining everything I was missing. When Mike came home from his honeymoon, I thought maybe he'd bring it up. Maybe he'd say he was sorry I couldn't come, or tell me some funny story from the wedding. But he didn't. He acted like I wasn't even a part of it, like I wasn't even worth acknowledging. 2 years later, Chris got engaged. I was 12 by then, and I thought things would be different. I was older, quieter, and very well behaved. I didn't whine or cause a fuss, and I made sure everyone knew it. So when they said his wedding was child-free too, I thought, okay, but this time I'll be invited. Nope. Once again, I got the same speech. Chris and his fiancée want the wedding to be adults only, Emily. It's not personal. Not personal? It felt personal. How could it not be personal when it happened twice? I tried not to cry this time. I was older and I wanted to act more mature. I didn't beg or scream. I just sat quietly while my parents made their excuses. My mom even tried to comfort me. You'll have your own wedding someday, and it'll be wonderful. You'll see. But it didn't make me feel better. I was starting to realize something. My siblings didn't see me as family, at least not in the way I saw them. When Rachel got engaged, I was 15. By then, I was a full-on teenager who wanted nothing more than to feel included. At first, Rachel didn't even plan on banning kids from her wedding. She wanted everyone to come. But of course, the family had to get involved. My aunts and uncles kept saying things like, "It's so refreshing to have a wedding without kids running wild. And children just make things so chaotic." Eventually, Rachel caved. The rule became no one under 16. I was 15. 15. So close that it felt like a slap in the face. I went to Rachel and asked, "Can't I just be an exception? I'm your sister. I'll be quiet, I promise." Rachel looked at me with this serious expression and said, "If I make an exception for you, what about the other kids? It wouldn't be fair." Fair? Are you kidding me? I lost it. I started yelling, "It's not fair that I can't go to any of your weddings. I'm not just some kid, I'm your sister." That's when my parents got involved. I got grounded for 6 months for disrespecting Rachel and causing drama. 6 months. I spent most of that time in my room, just stewing in my anger and hurt. By the time Josh got engaged when I was 17, I didn't even bother asking. I already knew I wouldn't be invited. Sure enough, the announcement came, child-free wedding. At that point, I was numb to it. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, and I didn't ask why. I just accepted it. But what really stung? My cousin Amanda, who had just turned 18, was invited. I heard about it through the family grapevine. Apparently, they thought 18 was the cutoff. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda was only a few months older than me, but she got to go because she'd hit the magical age of adulthood. When my parents asked why I didn't make a big deal congratulating Josh, I just shrugged. I sent him a quick text. "Congrats. Hope it's a great day." Then I locked myself in my room like I always did. By that point, I had started to check out emotionally. I realized that I just didn't matter to them. I wasn't their little sister. I was just a kid they barely thought about. And it hurt. It really, really hurt. Years passed after the last wedding. I stopped trying to fit into my siblings' lives because, honestly, I was just tired. Tired of being the one left out. Tired of being the kid sister, who no one cared about unless it was convenient for them. By the time I met my now fiancé, Tyler, I'd pretty much checked out of the family dynamic. I didn't expect much from anyone anymore. Tyler was the first person to actually listen when I told him about my family. I remember sitting on his couch, telling him about how I'd been banned from 4 of my siblings' weddings, and he looked genuinely shocked. "Wait, they didn't invite you? Not even when you were like 15? "Nope," I said, trying to play it off like it didn't hurt anymore. "What the hell? You're their sister," he said. He just sat there shaking his head for a minute before adding, "That's seriously messed up." I think that was when I realized it really was messed up. I'd spent so many years convincing myself it was normal. Child-free weddings sounded reasonable on paper. It wasn't like I was being deliberately targeted, right? But no. 4 times my family chose to exclude me. Not a single sibling thought, "Hey, Emily should be there." It wasn't normal. So when Tyler and I got engaged a few years later, I knew one thing for certain. My wedding was going to be different. My wedding was going to be full of people who actually cared about me. People who wanted to celebrate me, not just show up because it was expected of them. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't inviting my siblings. It wasn't some big dramatic moment. I didn't write an angry letter or announce it in the family group chat. I just left them off the guest list. Simple as that. I knew it would blow up eventually, but I figured I'd cross that bridge when I got there. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months before the wedding. My mom called me randomly one afternoon, acting weirdly chipper. I should have known something was up. "So, Emily," she said in that voice she always used when she wanted something, "how are the wedding plans coming along?" "Good," I said cautiously. "Everything's almost done." "That's great," she said, pausing for a moment before adding, "Your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My heart started pounding. I didn't want to have this conversation. Not yet. "Yeah, I sent them out," I said, trying to sound casual. She didn't miss a beat. "Well, they didn't get one. Maybe it got lost in the mail?" I sighed. "Mom, I didn't invite them." There was silence on the other end of the line, just a heavy, shocked pause. Then came the explosion. "What? Emily, how could you not invite your own family? Your siblings? What's wrong with you?" I gripped the phone and tried to stay calm. "They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom. Not a single one of them. So I'm returning the favor. It's fair." She sounded like I just committed a crime. "That was different. You were young. They didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. Well, it hurt anyway. And now I'm done pretending like it didn't. She started in on the guilt trip immediately. "Emily, you're being spiteful. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this. What are people going to think? And there it was. What will people think? My mom's favorite concern. I cut her off before she could say anything else. I don't care what people think, Mom. This is my wedding, and I'm only inviting people who care about me. They didn't care enough to include me in their big days, so I don't see why they deserve to be at mine. She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. That night, the group chat blew up. It started with Rachel being fake as usual. Hey, Em, did something happen with the mail? We haven't gotten our invites yet. Then came Chris, blunt as always. What's going on? Why aren't we invited? I stared at my phone for a long time, debating whether or not to reply. Part of me wanted to lay it all out, to tell them exactly how much they'd hurt me over the years. But another part of me didn't see the point. They wouldn't get it. They never had. So I didn't say anything. I just left the chat on read. Tyler noticed I was quiet during dinner and asked what was wrong. I showed him the messages, and he shook his head. You don't owe them an explanation, Em. They made their choices. Yeah, but I trailed off. They're gonna make me out to be the bad guy. I know it. Let them, he said firmly. You know the truth. That's all that matters. The next day, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't even have to ask what they were there for. My mom came storming in the second I opened the door. What are you thinking, Emily? Not inviting your own siblings to your wedding? What kind of person does that? I tried to stay calm, even though my patience was wearing thin. Mom, I told you. They didn't think I was important enough to include in their weddings, so I'm not including them in mine. My dad finally spoke up, his voice stern. You're being childish, Emily. You're holding on to something that happened years ago. That's when I snapped. I was a child when they did it, Dad. I begged to be at their weddings, and they all shut me out. Don't talk to me about being childish when I was the one left crying at home 4 times. They didn't know what to say to that. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't let her guilt me this time. You can keep defending them if you want, but I'm not changing my mind. If they cared about me, they would have shown it back then. They left, furious and frustrated. Over the next few days, the messages from my siblings got nastier. Chris called me selfish. Rachel said I was ruining the family. Josh didn't even bother sugarcoating it. You're being petty, Emily. Grow up. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. Tyler hugged me one night while I was scrolling through their messages and said, I'm proud of you, you know, for standing up for yourself. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself too. After the first round of family drama, I expected things to die down. I figured they'd grumble to each other for a while, maybe complain to some distant cousins, and then move on. That's how things usually went when my family didn't get their way, but I underestimated just how big of a deal they were going to make this. It started small. Rachel, of course, couldn't resist posting a passive-aggressive status on Facebook. Family is forever, even when some people forget what that word means. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Tyler was scrolling next to me on the couch, and when I showed him the post, he shook his head. What is she, 14? Basically, I muttered, trying to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew the truth, and I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it still bugged me. It's hard not to feel hurt when your own sister goes out of her way to take shots at you publicly. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little jabs started showing up in our extended family group chat. I'd muted it a long time ago, but Tyler still checked his phone one afternoon and said, Emily? You might want to see this. The messages were flying. Rachel. It's so sad when family starts prioritizing petty grudges over love. Chris. I just don't understand. I thought we were better than this. And then Mike, good old, I'm the eldest and I know best Mike, decided to take his shot. I never realized how much bitterness you've been holding on to, Emily. It's really sad. You're ruining relationships over something that happened years ago. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. They didn't get it. They still didn't get it. They made it sound like I was blowing a minor issue out of proportion, as if they hadn't spent my entire life excluding me. I wanted to reply. I wanted to type out every single thing they had done and make them see how hypocritical they were being, but I knew better. Arguing with them would just give them more ammunition. They'd spin my words into me being dramatic or unstable or whatever else they wanted to say to avoid taking responsibility. Instead, I did the one thing they never expected. I left the group chat. That night, my mom called me. I knew she'd heard about the group chat incident because she jumped straight into yelling the second I answered. Emily, what is wrong with you? Hi, Mom, I said flatly. Don't start with that attitude, she snapped. Do you know what you've done? Your siblings are heartbroken. You're destroying this family. Heartbroken? I laughed bitterly. They ignored me my entire childhood. But now they're heartbroken? Give me a break. You're being so spiteful, she said. You've always been like this, holding on to grudges and making everything about you. That's when I lost it. I'm the one holding grudges. I was 10 when Mike got married. 10. I cried because I wanted to be there, and you all told me I didn't matter enough to be included. And it didn't stop there. It happened again and again and again. I begged to be at Rachel's wedding, and she told me no, because it wouldn't be fair. That was years ago, she said dismissively. Yeah, and I'm still living with the way it made me feel. You all decided I wasn't important enough back then. Why should you suddenly get a front row seat to my life now? She didn't have an answer to that. Instead, she tried to flip the script. This isn't about the weddings, Emily. This is about you pushing everyone away because you're bitter. Tyler's probably encouraging you, isn't he? I groaned. Mom, stop blaming Tyler. This has nothing to do with him. This is about me finally realizing I deserve better than to be treated like I don't matter. Her voice softened, like she was trying to play the concerned mother. Emily, you don't understand. Family is all you'll have in the end. Friends and partners come and go, but your family is forever. No, I said firmly. Family is supposed to care about you. They're supposed to love and support you. That's not what you've been to me. She started crying. Big dramatic sobs that I knew were more about guilt-tripping me than anything else. You'll regret this one day, Emily, she said through her tears. You'll see. I don't think I will, I said quietly, before hanging up. Over the next week, things got worse. I blocked Rachel and Chris on social media because I couldn't take the constant snide comments. My mom called Tyler twice, apparently hoping to talk sense into him. He didn't answer. Then Mike sent me a long email, yes, an actual email, about forgiveness and family unity. He even had the nerve to quote some Bible verse about letting go of anger. I didn't respond. Tyler and I sat down one night, and I vented about everything. It's like they're determined to pretend I'm the problem. They don't see how messed up it is that they ignored me for years, and then flipped out when I finally stood up for myself. You know what it is? Tyler said. They're not mad that they weren't invited. They're mad that they don't get to control you anymore. That hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. My whole life, my family had treated me like an afterthought, like someone they could dismiss whenever it suited them. But now that I was doing something for myself, something they couldn't control, they couldn't handle it. They'll get over it eventually, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. And then Tyler said something that really stuck with me. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But either way, it's not your problem. He was right. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe my family anything. Not my time, not my attention, and certainly not an invitation to my wedding. A week later, my dad sent me a short, guilt-laden text. Emily, your mom isn't doing well. She's really upset about all of this. Maybe you could reconsider? I stared at it for a long time before replying. Maybe she should have thought about that before ignoring me all those years. I hit send, then blocked his number. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weeks leading up to my wedding were a strange mix of excitement and tension. On one hand, I was thrilled to finally marry Tyler and have the day I'd been dreaming of since I was a kid. On the other hand, the drama with my family still lingered like an unwelcome guest. My parents had stopped calling me directly, probably because I'd blocked my mom's number after her last meltdown. But that didn't stop the
worst was
noise
when my
from
aunt
reaching
called
me
me
out
out
of the
of the
blue.
blue.
I hadn't spoken to her in years, so I was immediately suspicious when her name popped up on my phone. I answered, and she got right to the point. Emily, honey, I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, she said, in her sweet but condescending tone. Family is family. It's not right to leave your siblings out of your wedding. I sighed, gripping the phone a little tighter. Aunt Linda, it's not just about the wedding. This has been years in the making. I'm not going to change my mind. But it's family, she pressed, like that word was supposed to fix everything. I'm sure they didn't mean to hurt you back then. Can't you just let it go and be the bigger person? I closed my eyes, trying not to snap. Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It's about knowing when to put yourself first. There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear her sigh dramatically. Well, I just hope you don't regret this. One day, you're going to miss your family, and they won't be there. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling an odd combination of peace and nerves. It wasn't the normal, what if something goes wrong, kind of wedding day jitters. It was more like I was waiting for a shoe to drop. I knew my family wasn't invited, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd find a way to insert themselves into the day somehow. But Tyler, being the amazing guy he is, refused to let me dwell on it. When I told him about my worries as we got ready separately, he just smiled and said, This day is about us. Nothing else matters. If anyone tries to ruin it, I'll personally escort them out. That made me laugh, and for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The venue we chose was perfect. It was small and intimate, a garden surrounded by flowers, twinkle lights strung through the trees, and a little gazebo where we'd say our vows. I didn't want a giant, elaborate wedding. I wanted something that felt real and full of love, and that's exactly what it was. My closest friends were there, along with some extended family who'd actually been kind to me over the years. It felt right. As I stood in front of the mirror, putting the final touches on my dress, my maid of honor, my best friend Jenna, walked in and grinned. "You look amazing, Em." "Thanks," I said softly, feeling a wave of emotions. Jenna sat on the edge of the couch and watched me for a moment. "Are you okay?" I hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I don't know. Sad, I guess. Not about today. Today's perfect, but about the fact that my family isn't here." She frowned and leaned forward. "Emily, it's okay to feel that. Just because you made the right choice doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Her words hit me hard. I turned to look at her, tears welling up in my eyes. I wanted them to care, you know. I wanted them to fight for me when I was a kid, and they never did. Jenna stood up and hugged me tightly. "You don't need their approval. You have people who love you. Focus on that." I nodded, taking a deep breath. She was right. Today wasn't about my family. It was about me and Tyler. When the ceremony started, I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of it all that I forgot about everything else. I remember standing at the end of the aisle, staring at Tyler, and thinking, this is it. This is what happiness feels like. As I walked toward him, I felt this sense of freedom wash over me. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the kid who begged to be included and got turned away. I was a bride, surrounded by people who truly loved me and wanted to see me happy. The vows were perfect. Tyler promised to love me, protect me, and always stand by my side, and I promised the same. By the time we said, "I do," there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, including mine. The reception was everything I hoped it would be. We laughed, we ate, we danced until our feet hurt. My friends toasted to us, sharing funny stories and heartfelt wishes for our future. Tyler's parents, who had always been so kind to me, told me they were proud to have me as part of their family. At one point, I snuck away from the crowd just to take it all in. I stood at the edge of the garden, looking at the lights twinkling in the trees and the people laughing together, and I felt so full. For so many years, I'd believed the lie my family told me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't important enough to be part of their lives. But standing there, watching all these people who truly cared about me, I realized something. I matter to the people who actually deserve to know me. Later that night, as the reception started winding down, one of my cousins pulled me aside. "Hey, Emily, I probably shouldn't say this, but..." I groaned. "What is it now?" She looked sheepish. "Your mom and Rachel apparently threw some kind of dinner tonight, like as an alternative to your wedding." I stared at her for a second, then burst out laughing. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "I know, it's pathetic. I just thought you should know." I shook my head, still laughing. "That's fine. Let them throw their pity party. I hope the food's good." I could tell my cousin expected me to be upset, but honestly, I wasn't. If anything, it was proof that I'd made the right decision. My family had spent my whole life excluding me, and then trying to justify it. Now that I was the one drawing the boundary, they couldn't handle it. At the end of the night, Tyler and I shared one last dance while everyone gathered around us. As we swayed together, I whispered, "I'm so happy we did this." He smiled down at me. "Me too, Em. This is just the beginning." And for the first time, I believed it. My family wasn't there. They didn't get to see the best day of my life, but that was their loss, not mine. Because as I looked around the room, surrounded by love and laughter, I realized I had everything I'd ever needed, and none of it had come from them. I thought the worst of it was over after the wedding. I really did. The day had been perfect, everything I hoped for and more, and I felt like I'd finally moved on from my family's nonsense. I didn't miss them at the ceremony. I didn't spend a second wondering what it would have been like if they were there. I was surrounded by people who loved me, and that was enough. But if there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that they don't like being ignored. It's almost like they couldn't handle the fact that I was happy without them, so they decided to stir the pot one last time. It started with a message from Rachel a week after the wedding. Of course it was Rachel. She'd always been the one to throw the first stone when it came to family drama. "Saw some pics from your wedding. I can't believe you had it in a garden. Looked casual, but I guess that's what you wanted." I stared at the message, stunned. She couldn't even pretend to be nice. It wasn't enough for her to just leave me alone. She had to find something to criticize. I was tempted to reply with something snarky, something about how her wedding might have been fancier, but at least mine wasn't full of fake smiles and people who didn't care about me. But I stopped myself. I didn't owe her a response. A few days later, I started getting messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Rachel, Mike, and Chris were on some kind of campaign to paint me as the villain. My Aunt Linda, yes, the same one who tried guilt-tripping me before the wedding, sent me another message. Emily, I don't know what happened between you and your siblings, but they're really hurt. Rachel says she tried to reach out, and you're ignoring her. Maybe it's time to let go of the past? I sighed and rolled my eyes. How many times did I have to explain this? How many people did my siblings need to rope into this mess before they realized I wasn't budging? Tyler noticed I was frustrated and sat down beside me. Another guilt trip? He asked, glancing at my phone. Yeah, Aunt Linda again. She says they're hurt. He snorted. Hurt because they can't control you anymore. I smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. I just don't get it. They ignored me for years. I begged to be included in their lives, and they shut me out. Now suddenly, I'm the bad guy for setting boundaries? That's how it always goes, he said softly. When you start protecting yourself, the people who hurt you are the first ones to cry about it. The real low point came a few days later when my mom showed up unannounced. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Tyler and I were having a lazy day, making brunch in pajamas, laughing over burnt pancakes. We heard a knock at the door, and I froze. I just knew it was her. Sure enough, I opened the door to find my mom standing there, looking as dramatic as ever. Emily, she said, her voice already carrying that familiar tone of disappointment. We need to talk, I sighed. Mom, now isn't a good time. She didn't care. She pushed the door open slightly, trying to step inside. Tyler appeared behind me, gently putting his hand on my shoulder for support. Emily, please, she continued. This has gone far enough. Your siblings are devastated. I'm devastated. Do you really think this is how family should act? I clenched my jaw and kept my voice calm. You don't get to show up here and lecture me, Mom. I invited the people who care about me to my wedding. They didn't make the cut, and that's their fault, not mine. Her face fell into that familiar look of disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend how I could possibly stand up to her. You don't mean that. They love you, Emily. They're your family. No, Mom, I said, my voice firm. They're not. Family doesn't make you feel small. Family doesn't leave you out when you're a kid and then demand to be part of your life when it's convenient for them. I spent my entire life trying to prove I mattered to them, and they never cared. I'm done. She blinked, stunned into silence for once. I could tell she wanted to argue, but Tyler stepped forward, his voice gentle but strong. I think it's time for you to leave, he said simply. My mom looked between the two of us, her face a mix of anger and sadness. You'll regret this, Emily, she said, her voice soft now, like she was delivering a prophecy. You'll miss us one day, and we won't be there. I met her eyes, unflinching. No, Mom, I won't. Tyler shut the door behind her, and for a moment, I just stood there, trying to process it. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I didn't. I felt relief. The next day, I got a text from Chris. Mom said she came to talk to you and you slammed the door in her face. Real mature, Emily. You've turned into someone I don't even recognize. I read the message aloud to Tyler, who shook his head. Block him. You don't need that. And I did. One by one, I blocked every sibling and relative who decided to pile onto the guilt train. I realized something important that day. I didn't owe them my time, my energy, or even an explanation. For years, they made me feel invisible. Now, I was taking control. The weeks that followed were quiet for the first time in a long time. Without the constant messages and passive-aggressive comments, I finally felt like I could breathe. Tyler and I focused on settling into married life, decorating our little apartment, and planning our future. One night, we sat on the couch, watching some cheesy movie, and Tyler turned to me. Do you regret it at all? Not having them at the wedding? I thought about it for a moment before shaking my head. Number I thought I would, but I don't. I spent so long trying to earn their approval, and for what? I don't miss them. I don't miss feeling like I'm not good enough. He smiled and squeezed my hand. Good. You deserve better. And he was right. I did deserve better. A month after the wedding, I got one final message. This time it was from Rachel's number, sent through a different phone since I'd already blocked her. You've destroyed this family, Emily. I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen for a second before deleting the message. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt done, because I was happy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of love and attention. I was surrounded by people who cared about me, and that was enough. It always had been.
Go ahead and file the divorce papers. I don't need the kids, he said, walking out the door, leaving me with our 3-year-old twins and our newborn daughter. I had my suspicions about his infidelity, but between parenting and work, I pushed them aside. I can't take this anymore. My twin daughters clung to me, their little faces full of worry. "Mommy, I love you," they said. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Despite my anger, I found clarity. "Fine, let's do it," I said, signing the divorce papers without a second thought. A bitter smile crept across my face. He has no idea what's coming. After all the support I've given him, he's the one who'll regret this. And so, unknowingly, he started his downfall. I'll be late again tonight. How many times had I heard those words? I'm Maya, 34 years old. We married 4 years ago, and I spoiled him a bit, probably because he's 2 years younger. The next year, we had twin daughters, and 3 years later, our third daughter arrived. Around the time she was born, he began coming home late, constantly. He used to say, "I hope the third one's a boy. I want to play catch with him." He was excited during the pregnancy, but everything changed when he found out it was a girl. At the hospital, he frowned when he saw our newborn daughter. "She doesn't look like me. She's not cute." Anger surged through me. How could he say that about his own child? What kind of father says that? I think that's when I first considered divorce. Even after we came home, his mood didn't improve. As my maternity leave was ending, he barely helped with the kids. "Show some interest in them," I told him. "If you're overwhelmed, hire a babysitter. You have savings," he replied. I had a solid job at a top company, earning more than most women my age. Meanwhile, he was constantly changing jobs, struggling to hold one down. Maybe he resented my success. At the time, he was doing temporary work, and I worried about how long that would last. Since I couldn't count on financial support, I at least hoped he would step up as a father. But when I asked him to spend time with the kids, he complained, "It's too much work." Even when he did help, it was half-hearted and the girls were bored. He noticed they didn't like him much, and it bothered him. This pattern continued until one day, he just stopped helping altogether. "I'm tired from work. I need my weekends to rest." He'd either shut himself in his room or go out with someone else. Today, I had to work, even though it was the weekend. "I'm stuck if you don't watch the kids. I have things to do. Bye." He refused to watch them. I couldn't leave them alone, so I often had to find a babysitter last minute. This was tearing our marriage apart and hurting the kids, so I decided to consult with his parents. Their response was disappointing. "A wife must endure. That's the key. And don't forget to take care of what I mentioned the other day." My parents live far away, so I rarely see them. I didn't feel comfortable calling them and didn't know who else to turn to. "Hey, make me some food." I came home one evening to find my husband in pajamas, the room a mess. The only bright spot was seeing my kids, bored with their toys, light up with big smiles when they saw me. "Where were you so late?" "I had some errands at your parents' house. Now hurry up and make dinner. I'm starving." "If you've been home all day, couldn't you have done the laundry or cleaned the bathroom?" He smirked at my question. I've decided not to do anything for people who don't show proper gratitude. "What do you mean?" "I cleaned the bathroom yesterday, and you didn't even thank me." I'm sure I said thank you. "Not that kind of thank you. I'm talking about $200 as a thank you." He held out his hand, asking for money. I was too tired and frustrated to argue, so I called him to the bathroom to talk away from the kids. "I do everything. work, house chores, and take care of the kids. Haven't you ever thanked me? It's a wife's duty. And what's your duty? I work too. Despite earning only $1,000 a month and doing nothing at home, he still had the audacity to demand more. We argued for an hour. "Mommy, I'm hungry." My daughter's voice pulled me back to reality. My husband stormed off, but I ignored him and hurried to make dinner. In the tense atmosphere, I uncovered his secret. My husband was having an affair. I confided in a colleague I've known since college. She had also divorced because of her husband's infidelity. "You should gather evidence right away," she advised, sharing tips on how to do it. I had suspected something for a while. Just before our youngest was born, I noticed a sweet scent on him that wasn't familiar. "Were you wearing perfume?" I asked casually. He started sweating and stammered. There were other signs: late nights, less conversation, his distance from the kids, and a lack of intimacy. But one incident confirmed it for me. "There was lip balm in your jacket pocket." "It's mine. My lips get chapped." "Are you using Chanel's pink lip balm?" "Oh, well, maybe it's my mom's." His awkward excuse sounded like a lie. As he rushed to the bathroom, I saw it. "What's that?" It was a love bite in a spot usually covered by clothes. I almost confronted him, but decided I needed proof first. "Take your time in the bath," I said, pretending not to notice. The next day, I got home late from work and found my daughters already asleep. The house was quiet except for the light in the dining room, where my husband stood holding a piece of paper. "I've had enough. Let's get a divorce." "What? You want a divorce? And you don't want the kids?" He handed me the papers and walked out before I could respond. "Mommy," the twins woke up from the sound of the door, looking worried. "It's okay. Sorry for waking you," I reassured them, though things were far from okay. "He says he's had enough. That's my line. And he doesn't want the kids. How could he?" Tears flowed as emotions overwhelmed me, but I barely noticed. "Mommy, I love you," my daughter said, hugging me tightly. At that moment, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't let my daughters carry this burden. If I only had them, I'd find happiness. I finally knew what I needed to do. "Fine. Let's file the papers." I said it with determination, and my daughters smiled. That night, we all slept peacefully. The next morning, I submitted the divorce papers and made a call. "Yes, go ahead. It's my husband who's going to be in trouble." The person on the other end listened and acted. I'd thought about this for a while. If my husband betrayed me, I'd make sure everything he'd done came crashing down, even if it meant his life would fall apart. No regrets. 3 days later, "Maya, where were you?" I came home from work to find my parents-in-law and husband waiting. My mother-in-law was angry, my father-in-law looked pale, and my husband seemed completely clueless. "Did you wait outside the door the entire time?" "That's unsettling." "This isn't the time for that." "What's going on?" She shoved a letter at me. "It's a notice from a lawyer. It's pretty clear if you read it." Her face flushed red and her voice grew louder. "I have to pick up the girls, so if you'll excuse me." I walked into the house, ignoring them. My furious in-laws followed me into the living room, insisting we talk. "Why did you send this out of the blue?" "We don't understand." "You'll get it when you read the letter." Using a lawyer is cowardly. Even though they were in the wrong, they quickly tried to flip the situation. Frustrated, I struggled to explain. Finally, my clueless husband chimed in. "Is this because you're unhappy with the divorce and filing a complaint?" My in-laws stared at him, shocked. Of course, he had no idea about everything I had done for them over the years. "We never heard about a divorce. Is that why this is happening? Our son is completely useless." "What's the rush? You've ruined everything. Hold on, what's going on? As their conversation went in circles, my mother-in-law slammed the table. Why did you divorce, Maya? Ah, well, my husband stammered, caught off guard. So I stepped in. Because he completely neglected his responsibilities as a husband and father. You keep saying men are like that, right? Would you forgive your father-in-law for cheating then? What? Clearly, she wasn't expecting me to mention her son's infidelity. My husband tried to speak, but a sharp look from me stopped him. Suddenly, my father-in-law defended his son. A man's affair is just a game. It's not a big deal. Arguing is pointless. Please leave. Any further communication will go through my lawyer. Why involve a lawyer now? You'll agree to the divorce, right? My husband looked confused. I've not only agreed, but I've already filed the papers. What, then why? As my husband and I argued, my mother-in-law started crying. How can you expect me to pay $39,500 all at once? What's with that amount? Who's getting paid? Finally, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. I revealed my secret with confidence. 4 years ago, just after we got married, my mother-in-law asked to talk. I need to discuss something. Nervous, I agreed to listen, thinking I'd do anything for my new mother-in-law. But her request shocked me. Can you lend me $40,000? I was completely blindsided. She even asked about my annual income without any hesitation, leaving me stunned. I couldn't handle the pressure and blurted out my earnings. Maybe over $165,000. Her eyes lit up. Apparently, my father-in-law had become addicted to horse racing, blowing through money and racking up debt. She begged me, desperate for $40,000 to repay the debt, and I couldn't refuse. I made it clear, you must pay me back, before lending her the money. 4 years went by, and she only paid back $2,600. Sometimes she'd return some money, only to borrow it again. Realizing I'd never see the full amount, I hired a lawyer to demand the remaining $39,500. My husband's shocked expression almost made me laugh. I promised to repay it gradually. Why demand it all at once? We're no longer family. I don't need to be considerate. That's when my mother-in-law let out a screech, furious at my husband. You caused this with your affair. You should pay it instead of me. Why me? We're retired. Our pension won't cover it. If you want to stay in my house, listen to me. Of course, she couldn't pay the $39,500. And my husband was unemployed at the time. I'm going to live with Laura, so I won't pay. Is that your mistress? Tired of this back and forth, I decided to end it. Don't think it stops at $39,500. I'm also demanding $113,000 from both you and your mistress as compensation. And don't forget child support. What? You can't do that. It's only fair. It's the price for neglecting your kids and fooling around. Where's the proof I cheated? Have you already forgotten you just admitted you're moving in with Laura? I sighed and handed him the stack of evidence I'd gathered. I felt sick just looking at these. The photos were from his social media, showing him kissing and hugging his mistress. My lawyer had seen them too, and they were undeniable. Why do you have these? I found your social media online. It's pathetic you thought no one would find it. My foolish husband had left his account open for the public, posting carefree photos. It was surprising that someone so clueless about technology would be so careless, but it made gathering evidence of his infidelity easy. My in-laws were stunned, staring at him with their mouths open. All right, it's time for you to leave. I need to pick up the kids. At least don't go after Laura for compensation. What if she leaves me? I don't care. Since the situation wasn't getting better, I kicked the three of them out. Open up, help me, I didn't know about the debt. I could hear my husband yelling through the door for a while. I'll call the police. At that, they finally left, dejected. A year has passed since then, and after paying me compensation, the mistress disappeared. Now my ex-husband, stuck living with his parents, was pressured to cover the $39,500, so he borrowed from a shady dealer. I got my money back quickly, but he's still on the hook for the $113,000 in compensation and $330 in monthly child support. He's earning his daily wage doing manual labor from morning till night. The interest on his debt is piling up, and he might never repay it in his lifetime. But that's not my concern. Mommy, hurry up, or we'll be late. Oops, my daughters are calling. Time to head to the daycare. They're growing up so fast. That alone brings me joy.